So current animal advocacy documentaries are heir to the shocking videos and footage that, beginning in the 1980s, became these effective tools that the animal liberation and the animal rights movements used to raise awareness and denounce the hidden practices in animal exploitation industries. We have our usual film classics there from the 80s, Unnecessary Fuss, Bridges, Hidden Crimes, the Animals film. I'm sure you're all familiar with them. And so from very early on, the movement actively explored the possibilities that documenting and gathering footage could afford for the elaboration of audiovisual advocacy narratives. But there are a couple of assumptions regarding 21st century viewers that sort of mark a transition from this earlier 1980s material. Firstly, I would say that because of the impact of the movement, viewers, and by viewers, I would refer to your average Western, in this case, mass media consumer, they have some knowledge about there being such a thing as an animal rights debate or controversy. I honestly don't believe that they don't, right? And that such controversy concerns everyday practices having to do with the consumption of animal-based products or products tested on animals, clothing industry, entertainment industry, etc. And secondly, these viewers have acquired and developed perspectives that are very much influenced by the exposure to mass media about climate change, species extinction. They've been exposed to fake news, to post-9/11 rhetoric, anti-terrorist rhetoric, right? The ongoing fight against racism and speciesism, and sexism, the growing impact of celebrity culture, all of which greatly determine and influence the shaping of advocacy narrative. Now, the documentary genre has, in the last 2 decades, as we all know, largely explored the significance of signature issues to the genre, such as truth, authenticity, and authority. It's a genre that cloaks itself under claims of objectivity, which is a pretension that at the same time sparks a lot of criticism. And it really has explored the plasticity of its forms of storytelling. So in exercising their relation to reality, documentaries don't just inform, right? They can entertain, distort, authenticate, mystify, demystify. They can rhetorize their subject matter in a whole number of ways that I don't have time to get into right now, but just the general idea. Now, activist documentaries' claims to truth are, of course, fundamentally connected to effective responses, and they seek to inspire some sort of action. And of course, in the case of animal advocacy, this would be inspiring viewers to lead a vegan lifestyle or protesting against certain administrations and companies, or boycotting certain products, or just supporting certain organizations, or even just disseminating animal rights media. And these documentaries are deserving of critical attention because of the notable increase of their production in the past 20 years, and because they greatly contribute to the body of media that seeks to raise awareness about humans' abuse of non-human animals. And they are a part of this larger body of audiovisual media, which involves other types of films, news reports, video essays like the ones we've just seen, TikToks, etc. And so the documentaries are to be regarded not as isolated material, but as historically determined productions that are consciously shaped into discourses, narratives, and other forms of persuasion that speak to this wider intertext of activism. As Friedman and Tulloch state in their study of a sample of animal liberation documentaries, there's one thing that all these films are said to have in common, which is, I quote, "Even when documentaries avoid direct comparisons to humans, all seek to convince viewers that other animals have consciousness and sensitivity, in essence, agency," right? So there's little exegetical space allowed by animal advocacy documentaries in this regard. And having grounded the truth in such claims, non-human animals cannot but be represented in these stories as subjects of a life, sentient beings, agents, and of course, victims, right? As Afterheide observes regarding activist documentaries in general, she writes, I quote, "They, like propaganda films, deserve attention from anyone who wants to understand the techniques of persuasion, and nothing persuades like reality." Okay, so with that little brief introduction in mind, I want to just share with you a few observations that I picked up on after the organization of 2 film cycles revolving around animal advocacy documentaries. And each cycle was part of a larger research project. Our first research project was called Representations of Masculinities in Animal Advocacy Documentaries in English. This was a much smaller and humbler project. It ran from 2022 and 2023. And our second and ongoing project is called The Ethics and Aesthetics of Animal Advocacy Documentary Film in 21st Century Western Culture. This is a much more generously funded project, more ambitious one. And both projects are funded by the regional government, the Generalitat Valenciana, okay? And so among other activities, what we did, like I said, is organize these 2 film cycles. So for a period of 6 weeks, for 1 weekday, okay, so once a week, we would screen a film for audience, and after that, screen a film, and then after that, engage in a discussion with the audience. So basically, our objectives were to contribute to the dissemination of animal advocacy films and media, so as to raise awareness of the situation. We wanted to educate the public and engage viewers in conversations on animal ethics related media by discussing issues pertaining to the representation of non-human animals in nonfiction films, okay? And also engage them so as to attempt to instill feelings of interspecies empathy, and not just relying so much on the screening, but by properly navigating the discussions there. Now, the venue that we picked for that is called Cines Babel, and this is a commercial theater. So it means that people actually have to pay a ticket to go here. And one of our objectives was really to reach a demographic beyond our usual university students, okay? And we picked Cines Babel for a series of reasons. First of all, it's a small theater. It's not your usual, you know, big blockbuster popcorn place kind of theater, but it has a very established reputation in Valencia. It is, first of all, a theater that in which all films are screened in their original language with Spanish or Valencian subtitles. It's the type of theater that you actually can't bring in food and drinks to the room, which I think speaks loud about the spirit of the theater owners in terms of wanting their audience to engage rationally and emotionally with the film and not get distracted by food and drinks. And it's a theater that is already used to putting together these types of cycles that have to do with identity politics. So they regularly set up cycles like women's films or Japanese films, or films having to do with disability studies, etc. And so from the get-go, we are very much aware that we're trying to reach out and appeal to an audience that already goes there in the first place to seek a discussion. Okay, and this, I believe, is very important for the audience to already come in with that more positive predisposition. Otherwise, sometimes it's just hitting a brick wall, right? So, like I said, each cycle ran for 6 weeks. I'm not sure, that's probably not going to be very visible, okay? But this was the program for our first cycle. Our first film was Blackfish, the second one, Project Nim. On the third week, we did The Ghost in Our Machine. The fourth week, we did Empatía, which is a Spanish documentary. The fifth week, The Cove, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with most of these films. And last but not least, German film, The End of Meat by Mark Pierschow, of course. And we screened this on Tuesday evenings, and it's not so easy to pick, on Thursday evenings. So we would begin the screening at 7, and after that, engage in a discussion with the audience. And we would have a guest speaker, mostly us project members, trying to, to moderate these talks. It's not so easy to actually pick a good weekday. A lot of thinking goes into that. I don't have the time to discuss that now, but for our, and we organized that first cycle in the spring of 2023, and our second cycle, we just organized it this past February. And we actually switched it to Tuesdays, which turned out for the better. And we had a more attendance and a larger, probably more involved response from viewers. So we did Arnold's Cow, Santa Fiesta, directed by Royan, which is another Spanish documentary, Butenland, another film by Piershaw, Gunda by Kosakowski, Stray by Elizabeth Lowe, and The Animal Thing by Adam Lindsay. So what were the logistical difficulties behind this? First of all, the admin issues and the whole management of the funding. Now, I had absolutely zero experience in putting something together like this outside the academic community. So it was mostly, there were some situations that were sort of trial and error thing, the whole contacting the filmmakers, the distribution companies, the production companies, the constant publicizing, and we did sort of upgrade that for our second cycle, and not just trying to publicize online and in university fora, but actually bringing pamphlets into vegan and vegetarian restaurants, managing to get the municipal buses to advertise it in the screens they have inside the buses, the city's cultural agenda, etc. And that's really, well, as activists, you have an idea of how extenuating it can be. But I would say that the biggest difficulty was probably facing the skepticism from the funding body itself, because it requires this whole lot of reports and proposals and different arrangements of the funding. And of course, Spain, like most other countries, have a very established history in speciesism and animal exploitation. But I will say that in the past 10 years, and it is my impression that animal rights issues have sort of gravitated towards more central space as opposed to being necessarily so marginal. Our current animal welfare law, which is so imperfect in so many ways and has so many weaknesses and faults and absences, but it is telling of the sort of overall atmosphere in terms of where the conversation might be moving towards. We have top-notch, mainstream journalists who have taken on animal ethics research, such as Jordi Évole. We have organizations in the line of Igualdad Animal, which from Spain, extended onto other countries, etc. So basically, in order to confront the very resistant funding body itself, not only for the organization of the cycles, but also for the application of the projects themselves, we went for two strategies. The first one was very much appealing to the Europeanization of our region or our country, right? We want to frame animal rights issues and animal ethics issues and connect them to other social justice issues and try to speak the language of the spirit of the European Union, which is a club that Spain really wants to fit into, at least with the exception of certain political parties, of course. Take a sort of ride that wave and take advantage of that timeliness. And our second strategy, and y'all will understand me because most of us are academics, is to emphasize this idea of transference. And because of the whole Bologna process and because of this vision of taking the academic research and outside of that ivory tower and finding its application in the real world, okay? So trying to speak the language of those educational visionaries to convince and persuade them. In terms of the corpus, the films that I referred to, this was also sort of a difficult task. First, because of course you want to use films that, you know, considering the efficiency that the stories may bring about. The first issue is the whole, and it's an ongoing issue, and the whole idea of, do we want to show films in the line of these omnibus documentary films in the line of Earthlings and Dominion, which are, of course, classics, and revolves so much around the idea of moral shock, right, as understood by Jasper and Poulsen. And of course, other films that we featured also have graphic footage, but it's not that sort of archival, nonstop, saturating, just bombardment of violence. I don't want to get too much into that because I know Zipporah is going to be talking about that afterwards. But we certainly have a lot of scholars that have gone into this. Laura here has delved a lot into the topic, Elisa Altola, Belinda Smale, etc. And for now, we decided not to, at the risk of alienating theater goers, but it is something that it's not a final decision in terms of cycles to come. And then a lot of matters regarding the selection of the corpus also had to do with what is actually available out there. Not all films are available in DCP format, right? Which is the format that usually your theater is going to be asking for. And mostly in our case, not all films have subtitles, okay? And this is something that it became very evident to us, it has become very evident to us that is a necessity. One of the films that we screened in the second cycle, The Animal Thing, sorry, it's ongoing dialogue. It's sort of this homage to the figure of Andrew Lindsay, and it's this string of interviews type of film. And we were working on the subtitles, but in the end, we didn't manage to get them in time. And we publicized the film as not having subtitles. We didn't want to cheat the audience, obviously. And I think, and that affected our afterwards discussion. You cannot assume that everybody is going to be speaking in English, of course. So, and we have offered to some of the filmmakers to translate their stuff beyond going into your usual AI or whatever. We're currently translating Leva's The Invisible Vegan. We've been in touch with Dennis Hennelly about Your Mommy Kills Animals. So we're looking into trying to contribute with the filmmakers to actually extend this beyond the English-speaking audience. But for that first cycle, okay, so we mostly, with these things in mind, one thing that we strategized about was keeping those limitations in mind, pick films with semiotic and intertextual component that an average Western viewer would be familiar with. And by this, I mean having a sort of recognizable plot line with your sort of Freytag pyramid structure, right? Your exposition, your rising action, your climax, your falling action or denouement, right? And also character-driven films. So we would have Blackfish and Project Nim are certainly character-driven. The Ghost in Our Machine with activist Joanne MacArthur is character-driven. You know, The Cove has some with the figure of Rico Berry is sort of character-driven. So having that sort of connection, we thought that would be positive. We have films that are structured in the line of a string of interviews, which is always very informative. But then The Ghost in Our Machine is very observational. And we found out that that worked very well. And by observational, we mean, you know, this unobtrusive camera that sort of follows the subject around. And so for our second cycle, considering the previous limitations I stated, we did go for a lot of observational mode. Cow, Santa Fiesta, Gunda, and Stray, none of them have narrators. It's all a very unobtrusive camera. And audiences feel that they're not being lectured in a way. They're not films that they don't conceive to be as preachy in a way. Of course, there are tons of manipulation that it doesn't necessarily have to just depend on the narrator. But I think it worked very well because despite them having the same kind of mode, they're films that are tremendously different, and they allowed us to move into alternative spaces. So farms in England, the streets in Istanbul, streets in Spain, sanctuaries and free-range farms, etc. We also wanted to continue portraying activists. So we went with Butenland, which, as you know, is a sort of conversion narrative, and the animal thing. And in terms of the guest speakers, mostly it's been of project members, but we've also had the chance to invite external people who work in animal law, and people coming in from other disciplines, from science, from philosophy, and have a sort of animal ethics mindset, if you will. One thing that we did heavily insist on as a change from the first cycle to the second cycle is that in the first cycle, we probably made a mistake, a couple of us, which is after screening the film, going into this like full-fledged academic presentation, PowerPoint and all. And that was not a good idea. People are tired, people are visibly upset by what they have seen, and it's not about you. So it's about giving people the opportunity to articulate what it is that they are feeling, and giving them the chance to flesh out verbally those emotions, and then giving them a verbal reality, right? Better getting a hold on them. So the big question being, what worked, what didn't, what is in the process of changing? I do have to say that no surveys were distributed after the screenings, and this was a conscious decision made. Again, it's not a final decision. I'd like to hear your thoughts as to surveys, and it's something that I keep thinking about, whether surveys are a good idea or not. The reason why we haven't passed out surveys, firstly, again, has to do with time. So we start at 7 p.m., you have about an hour and a half of a documentary, and then you're moving on to discussions which have gone as long as an hour and a half. Some of them have been shorter, but I would say the average would be around 45, 50 minutes. So it's almost Spanish dinner time, almost. And so adding to that, I wasn't too sure of the response that people would be having, because we have this what visibly looked like a very mixed type of demographic, okay? We had, of course, many people were already activists or involved in volunteering or sensitized to these issues. But we also had your average Carness citizen coming in and just having that positive predisposition in terms of having a discussion. And we even had people for the second cycle, like two men who they were in their 70s or 80s and had dedicated their lives to animal agriculture. And they didn't agree with most of what was being said or how it was being represented, but they had that predisposition towards engaging in conversation. And fortunately, they did admit to there being a lot of suffering in animal agriculture. So surveys, I'm not sure, if it would be a turnoff after the discussion to follow that with a survey, et cetera. But again, it's not a final decision. We did note an increase in the number of people. So on average, for the first cycle, we had about 20, 25 people per screening paying their ticket coming in. For the second cycle, we've had about 35 to 45. Some of the sessions, it sort of plummeted a little bit. Santa Fiesta, the topic is, so it's this observational mode about Spanish festivities related to bullfighting. And I think that might have affected people wanting to go in terms of perhaps being wary of the overexposure or the debate on these matters. And the second one, the animal thing, again, the subtitle issue really backfired, of course. One thing that we learned from the audience was that they were very responsive to talking about representation. So we would tell our speakers, don't go into these presentations, make sure that you're moderating, and that requires a lot of prepping, of course, but that if there are moments of silence or whatever, try to initiate conversations starting from the notion of representation and talking about the semiotics of film, angle, lighting, duration of shot, editing, narrator, etc. Because your average viewer probably feels that they're familiar with this type of language, at least intuitively. And so it's a good way to begin conversations, and from there go on into the whole discussion around animal ethics. And one thing that I did appreciate very much from the audience as well was the audience's predisposition to, whenever, when they wanted to intervene, to present themselves and briefly go through their background, the better to frame the perspective that they were going, or what their argument was going to be. And I think that this is really helpful in terms of trying to, bring the discussion beyond, all of those of us who may be convinced about these ideas already, obviously, and also reaching the audience thematically. Okay, in terms of following Vivian Sobchak's theories about film not being just this audiovisual type of medium, but also appealing to different types of senses. I remember in particular, we had this mother coming in, nursing her baby for all 6 screenings in the second cycle. Her name is Vivi. The baby was amazingly quiet throughout the entire films, but the first film we screened was Cal, and she was nursing her baby. And when the discussion came along, she was just in absolute tears, because she could relate so well through with Luma, with the character in the film, and how her babies are getting taken away. And that sort of opened the door for follow-up discussions on other ways through which to bodily connect with the non-human animals that are tragically collected in these films. For the future, things that we're still thinking about: the omnibus films, whether it's a good idea or not, where we want to expand the topics. We want to bring in the whole, documentaries that have to do with radical animal liberation, the whole connection with anti-terrorist rhetoric. We want films from different countries, and we want to collaborate in subtitling them and making them more accessible to the public, and trying to find films that also, I think what works well, again, is for viewers to feel that they are not being, that they have freedom of to express themselves, and freedom of interpretation, and freedom to engage however it is that they want with that type of intertext.